So in this chapter, we're going to dive into one of my favorite APIs, and this is something that we would typically use in perhaps a JavaScript framework. Now, if you want to think about things such as Angular and React, we have the Angular router, we have React router, and these modules or libraries behind the scenes will be using these native methods. So it's very important for us to understand the underlying implementations behind the scenes so we can master our craft to a higher level. Now, first we want to examine what is this history API. Now, the history API is essentially an object. It gives us some methods, it gives us some properties that we can use to essentially talk to the back and forward in our browser. You can see here that we have click to go forward, hold to see the history. We can then have click to go back, hold to see the history. So if we click and hold, you can see that we have this history. So you can think of this as a history stack. Every time we visit a web page, it then adds a page in our history stack. Now, the browser does this for us behind the scenes. If we were to go to the Ultimate Courses website and then go back, we can then click forward, and you can see here we have Ultimate Courses as the forward entry, and we then have our application to the various local host URLs that I've visited. So essentially, the history object is a magical object that gives us access to be able to control this. And you can kind of think of it as just a list, a stack of items that we can then control. We can trigger a back, we can trigger forward, or we can change the URL itself, which then in effect changes this history stack. So there are a few main APIs. There's back, there's forward, there's also the go API, but essentially we have replace state and push state. So we want to push some kind of state into our history stack. So that is all that we're going to learn in this chapter. Now, like with every chapter in this course, what I like to do is learn how to feature detect. So we're going to look at this window.history. If you want to just take it and paste it in your DevTools console, you can see that we have a history object. So from the get-go, we have some interesting properties. Now, I have already visited a few different pages, so then I have entries in my history object. You can see I have a length of 12. We also have a state object. So if you've perhaps used React before, you may have learned how to pass state alongside React router. We also have a couple of different methods. We have a newly added scroll restoration, which we can change. We also have that state on the prototype, and we have, as I mentioned, the back, forward, go, and we also have that length property as well. Now, mainly we'll probably want to use push state. We don't really want to use replace state, but we'll come on to that in further videos. Now, one thing that's quite interesting, and I've done this deliberately, is we have this length of 12, and this is because the history object is in fact session dependent. So that means if we take our URL, head across to a new tab, close our existing one, we can then bring up the DevTools. Now, if we say window.history, you can see that we have a length of 2, and that is the existing website, as well as the back button. If we say new tab, that then takes us back. So that counts as an entry in our history object. So now that we've understood the main principles, we've also looked at this window.history. Now, to be 100% sure, we can say window.history, and we'd like to check that this push state actually exists on our history object as well. So this is considered the most bulletproof way to check whether a browser does in fact support our window.history. If it does, we can then boot off our initialization function and start rendering some data for the user. So that's it for this video. This is a quick introduction to what this history API does, how it ties in with the browser. We can then start to think about this stack of history objects, and this will make much more sense and make it far more easy for us to understand when we come to looking at new push states. So that's it. Let's dive into the next lesson and start building.